Good morning.
Good morning.
As we have a quorum, we are calling to order the meeting of the Port Authority for the City of St. Louis, for its regularly scheduled meeting held on April 11, 2024 via video conference. May we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Williams,
Present.
Commissioner Seymour, Commissioner Kay,
Present.
I don't think Commissioner Seymour is.
She's on mute.
No, she's
I don't
not
think
at her
she's
desk
there.
at the moment. Do we have enough to proceed, or do we need to wait on Commissioner Seymour?
We need Commissioner Seymour.
We need Commissioner Seymour.
All right, then we'll wait. There she is. Wait for her to
There she
return.
There she is. All right.
You continue with the roll call, Janet.
Okay. Commissioner Seymour, you're on mute.
You're on mute.
Oh. Here.
Chair McBride.
Here. The first item on the agenda is approval of minutes for a meeting held on March 14, 2024. Is there a motion to approve?
I'm sorry, before we do one, Janet, it looks like Joan is in the attendees call.
Oh, okay.
Hang on.
We will pause.
We can add her to the roll call.
And Janet, could we continue with the roll call, please?
Okay. And Commissioner Miller.
I'm sorry, I just joined late. I don't know what the question is. Is it
Roll call.
Roll call.
present?
Perfect. Perfect. We'll take up the approval of the minutes for a meeting held on March 14, 2024. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion.
Moved by Commissioner Seymour. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Commissioner Miller. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Williams,
Aye.
Commissioner Seymour,
Aye.
Commissioner Kay,
Abstain since I wasn't at the meeting.
Commissioner Miller,
Aye.
Chair McBride.
Aye. And the motion passes and the minutes are approved. All right, let's take up resolution 24 PT 11, approving a fourth amendment to the contract with HDR Engineering. Who's going to walk us through that? Susan?
I will. Good morning, everyone. HDR is the engineer for the South River redevelopment project. And consequently, they are working on the design of the new trash transfer building at the moment, as well as monitoring the demolition of the smokestacks at the South Refuse site. In their contract was also a site assessment for 1200 Central Industrial, to which some of the South Refuse functions would move. And as I'm sure you all know, the Refuse Division is part of Streets Department. And so this is assigning some dollars to that task. The 1200 Central Industrial site assessment would not start until Street Department was ready for it to start. This add to their contract enables them to talk to the Street Department about what they want to see there. So that's the first part of this amendment to their contract. And that work would be up to $54,000 based on their fee proposal, which is part of your packet. The second task is what's called a cost benefit analysis. So the whole project, the whole South Riverfront redevelopment project can be assessed for what the benefits it generates. And so you look at things like a direct jobs. So if a warehouse were to go in, you'd have 10 to 20 warehouse jobs. Then you'd have secondary jobs. That would be the truck drivers, the barge operators, rail personnel. And so you develop a number or an analysis that then with the Port Authority can use to apply for federal grants. Some of the grants require that you have one. Others don't require that you have one, but it's always good to have one. And so that's the second addition or second part of this amendment to HDR's contract. And that the value of that work would be 45,000 and some change based on their $45,847.28 based on their fee schedule that's also in your packet. So this is a request for a fourth amendment to HDR's contract to provide, when the street department is ready, an analysis of the 1200 Central Industrial site and to prepare a cost benefit analysis that will help us apply for federal grants for the South Riverfront redevelopment overall project.
Thank you, Susan. So is it expected that this cost benefit analysis will end up paying for itself? Is that the idea?
Yeah, it indirectly, because it enables us, you have to have one to even apply for grant. And so one of the big grantors for this project is going to be the U.S. Maritime Administration. And we've talked to them already in Washington, and they're very supportive of the project, but their grants for construction for a project like this requires a cost benefit analysis. And so it helps you get the federal dollars to build a project like this.
And what's going to be the total amount that we'd be seeking for any grant from the Maritime Administration?
Probably somewhere per grant, $3 to $5 million. It depends on the grant. Some of them are $100,000 planning grants. Some of them are $2 million construction. It just depends on what's out there. We're in the process of pursuing about 5 or 6 right now.
Any questions for Susan from the commissioners? Hearing none. Very good. Well, at this time, I entertain a motion to approve resolution 24 PT 11.
So moved.
Second.
And properly moved and seconded. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Williams,
Aye.
Commissioner Seymour. You're on mute.
Aye. So,
Commissioner Kay,
Aye.
Commissioner Miller,
Aye.
Chair McBride.
Motion passes and the resolution is approved. We'll take up resolution 24 PT 12 now, approving issuance of a request for proposal for overnight security patrols. Susan, can you walk us through this, please?
Yes, we do have this summer 2 cruise lines that are coming to St. Louis. And so at the moment, we have 16 visits scheduled for those cruise boats. One is the Viking. One set of visits is from Viking Cruise Lines, the others from American Cruise Lines. And some of those boats park here overnight. And sometimes at night we have revelers that come down to the levee and have a good time. And so we would like to continue to have a security patrol. And they would, their officers would patrol from 7 at night to 7 in the morning, only when those boats are parked there overnight. And we've done this, we've been doing this since the 2021 season. And so for this particular application, we'd like to, we're requesting approval to issue an RFP for up to 3 years of the service, so we don't have to keep coming back. And last year we spent about $20,000 on their contract. And so going forward, depending on what the RFP results are, we'd expect some $20,000 to $25,000 a summer for these kinds of security services. So we'd like to issue an RFP to get a company to do that.
And remind me, how many security officers is that 20,000, did that 20,000 buy us?
In recent years, there've been two shifts, 7 p.m. to 1 a.m., staffed by 2 officers. And then the 1 a.m. to the 7 a.m. shift was staffed by 1 officer. So that would be 3 officers per night, times I think in this case, for this season coming up, 12 overnight stays.
And this is, so it's just security solely for the times that the cruises are coming in. Is that the idea?
Yeah, sometimes they'll come in in the middle of the night, but you want to make sure that there's nobody's left a suspicious package, that kind of stuff. So there's a little bit of kind of prep work. And sometimes they'll come in at 6 in the evening and they leave at 10 the next day, or, whatever their schedules are. But we figured from dusk to dawn is the best time to have them out there.
Is there going to be an issue if we collect new routes, so to speak, more than 12 visits from from cruises? Will we have to increase the amount of compensation paid to our security company? I mean,
Yes, we
trying to
would.
understand if the 3-year RFP makes sense or not is really what I'm driving at.
We have 12 overnight visits. Last year we had more than that because we had 3 cruise lines. So actually the one this year should be a little bit less than the 20,000 because we have fewer visits. I don't know how the cruise lines are going to staff up and build more boats. We could continue to do it on a 1-year basis if the concern is that the cost might go up. We would negotiate some sort of rate with them so that if there's more than 12 visits, it'd still be the same rate for the
Well, I
officer.
don't care if it's the same. I want everybody, A, I want quality security service. B, if we have more than 12 overnight stays, I want there to be security for those additional overnight stays is what I'm driving at. So whatever the RFP, however it's issued, we need to, if it's going to be for 3 years, we would need to account for that.
Okay, we can structure the RFP that way.
Any questions from the commissioners for Susan on this?
No.
This is the expense side of the Port Authority. What is the revenue side? Are we reimbursed for these? Remind me.
We used to not charge them anything, and then a few years ago, we started charging them $1 a head. And that $1 a head is based on the maximum number of passengers each boat can carry. So if the boat's certified for, say, 400 passengers, every time they come in, we charge them $400, even if they only had 300 passengers. So that's where we are with that, and it covers probably about half that cost.
So that still
varies.
exists. That arrangement still exists.
Yes.
Yes, it does.
Okay.
It's part of their permit, and we ask them for that money in advance. We've already asked them for that, in fact.
Okay.
And,
So they,
and go ahead.
sorry, I apologize. I should raise my hand, sorry.
Go ahead, Commissioner Wayne.
So what you're saying that they've paid in advance, so they've paid 400 times, how many times they're going to visit the city, or they pay 400 in advance? So we know what the revenue, we have all the revenue already up front.
We've billed them for it. So if we have the 12 overnight stays, it works out to however many passengers times the 12 visits, and times the $1. And so we've issued an invoice, and have we received all of our money from them? No.
Not
Okay,
No, so we haven't gotten the money back, but we've sent them a bill.
we've
And that's what
invoiced, okay, got you.
Okay, that's what they did last year. So they paid their money in advance and it worked smoothly.
Okay. I guess I was just looking at the revenue, making sure we had enough to cover whatever the bill will be for this year, if we had a guesstimate of what the revenue would be. And so based on what we've invoiced them, so we pretty much know what we will be getting back.
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions for Susan on this resolution? Susan, did we find that the security was effective for those nights that there were visits from the cruise lines?
Well, they're out there patrolling and before they did that, we had some episodes where revelers would try to walk onto the ramps of the boat. And so that hasn't happened. There's been, I mean, it's in a way, it's a hard question to answer because nobody's been attacked or assaulted or, been the victim of any kind of crime. So that, as far as I know, yes, it's effective. They are a visible presence. There's a patrol car that's parked there and they're walking around. So we think that deters some of the worst of it.
Let's not wait for something bad to happen before we spend money on that. It seems with the publicity that we are getting these days about St. Louis, any money spent on security is well spent. That's my 2 cents.
Well, I would agree.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the questions we have, Commissioner Seymour, are two officers on one shift and one officer on another shift? I mean, is that sufficient? I mean,
It seems to me that we should have 2 and 2, but of course, Susan knows better. It seems a lot of bad things happen after midnight, but I don't know. Maybe it's just a cliche.
What's happened in the past is Tom Sawyer and Becky Thatcher have events, and those events, and they have some security as well. And those events will end at 9:30, 9 or 9:30. And when their guests and staff have gone, like within 20 minutes, a crowd of the happy people show up in stolen cars, because they're watching. And as soon as all that's gone, and so the idea is to not let them get there and get them set up and enable them to kind of start rolling. So the 2 officers at the beginning seems like the best strategy. We could, if God forbid, if something goes wrong and we need to have a second officer for the second shift, we could look at that. I mean, we could add that. But at the moment, that seems to be the patterns. People show up once the Tom Sawyer, Becky Thatcher crowd leaves.
let's just keep an eye on this. I think that and this is something we discussed at the last RFP when it was issued last year, I believe, that I think the commission just wants to make sure that we're providing a safe environment for our visitors from the cruise lines.
Yeah, for sure.
With that, I would entertain a motion to approve resolution 24 PT 12.
So move Williams.
I second it.
Properly moved and seconded. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Williams,
Aye.
Commissioner Seymour,
Aye.
Commissioner Kay,
Aye.
Commissioner Miller,
Aye.
Chair McBride.
Aye. The motion passes and the resolution is approved. All right, taking up resolution 24 PT 13 relating to a PPS permit for Army Corps of Engineers. Susan, can you walk us through that, please?
Yes, the Army Corps from time to time likes to check for radioactive and other contaminants, radioactive soil and other contaminants near where Mallinckrodt processed the chemicals for the atomic bomb. And there's a picture in your packet of the 2 sites where they would like to look around again at Destrehan, the foot of Destrehan Street and Wharf and on Wharf Street. And so this is we would like to recommend that BPS give them a permit to walk around and see what they can find. Hopefully they won't find anything. They haven't thus far. So this is a request to the commission to allow us to recommend to BPS that BPS give them a permit to inspect whatever they want to look at.
Very good, with all the publicity from the Oppenheimer movie, I guess.
Yeah.
They're walking around and getting their Geiger counters out.
Yep.
Any questions for Susan on this? This is something that's come up in the past for us to consider. Any questions for Susan? Hearing none, at this time, I entertain a motion to approve resolution 24 PT 13.
So moved.
For request for
Second.
previous role.
Call for previous roll.
Been properly moved and seconded with the request for previous role. Is there any objection to that request?
No.
Hearing none, the motion passes and the resolution is approved. And now we're taking up resolution 24 PT 14 for the Port Authority budget for fiscal year 2025. Charlie, you're gonna walk us through that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you all hear me?
We can.
Yes.
Every year at this time, usually March, April, we prepare a budget for the ensuing fiscal year, which starts July 1st. The Port Authority has basically three funds that it budgets for. The first one is the Port Development Fund, which it collects revenues from all the leases up and down the river. With the and then the second fund is the Improved Wharf Fund, which is basically the cobblestone levee between I guess it goes up to the steam plant down to Shodo, that basic area. And the third fund is the Municipal Terminal Fund, which we have a lease from the city and sublease it to a tenant. Currently it's SCF. The first budget I mentioned, the Port Development Fund budget, captures revenue from all the leases, and there's approximately 40. Some are in process of being executed, some are in the middle of their terms. But the exhibits that are attached to the resolution show the current year budget of FY24 and what we project the activity to be for 24. Of course, the year is not over yet. It ends at June 30th. And then the proposal before you today is the budget for FY25, starting July 1, going through June 30th of 25. The Port Development Fund budget is included in the overall city budget, and the other two are not. They're just Port Authority approvals. They were set up by ordinance that way, that they're the Improved Wharf Fund is used to make maintenance and improvements within the Improved Wharf, and the City Terminal Fund is used to make improvements and within the port terminal area. So the first one is the Exhibit A, the Port Development Fund, and due to Susan's hard work, the lease revenue we're projecting this year a little higher than the budget, $2,126,000. 2,126,000 is the projection. In FY25, we're projecting 2.4 million. And that's because we have some new leases coming online, and some will be hitting junctures in the lease whereby we would analyze the rent and determine if a rent increase is applicable. The other revenue item is the carryover from the prior year, and we're projecting a carryover of 592,000 from the prior year. That's offset by expenses with the city internal services of 25,000, and I listed a number of departments there that might comprise that. Professional services, which are the legislative consultants that we have both in Jefferson City and in Washington, D.C., 185,000. The wharf cleaning, where we assist the street department, and to the tune of 300,000. And the SLDC administration of 850,000. And then the final item of expense is the 1520 market lease, which is debt service on the improvements made to house SLDC, CDA, and PDA. It's basically the second floor at 1520, and that is 373,000. The Port Authority is the instrument the city chose when they leased the space, that they would deduct from the Port Authority revenue, and that is the annual payment right now. So the expense we expect at 1,733,000 compared to the revenue, both the current year lease revenue and the rollover is 2.7, so it's roughly $1 million of income. We transfer 200,000, which was the budget approved last year, to the city terminal account because they still maintain a debt when we borrowed money to build the dock at the city terminal. So that's a principal prepayment of 200, leaving an amount of 785 to be transferred to FY25. In FY25, we're projecting lease revenue at 2.4 million plus the 785 is a total of 3,185,000, offset by expenses in those same categories. The slight increase in professional service and the Port District infrastructure. We went from 50 to 300,000, and the SLDC commitment went from 850 to 1.3 million, and the debt on the 1520 building is 375, resulting in a total expense of $2,710,000, about a $475,000 surplus. We're asking that we transfer 300,000 to prepaid debt at the city terminal. By the way, that note is started at 4 million and it's down to about 2 million, but the sooner we pay it off, we think the better. And if we got excess funds.
I'm sorry, Charlie, I didn't hear. How much was it to begin with?
4 million, roughly.
Uh-huh. And now it's down to?
It's down to 2 million right now, roughly.
And who do we owe the money to?
Busey Bank.
Oh, Busey Bank, okay. Thank you.
Anyway, this would ask this board to approve 300,000 to further reduce that debt on a faster scale. It was a 15-year note. We might be able to pay it off, if the numbers keep tracking, maybe in 5 more years. So that's the Port Development Fund, and I can answer questions after I finish all these, but I'll quickly move to Exhibit B, showing the improved wharf budget. The same setup, the current year budget in the first column, the projections for the current year in the second, and the budget for the next year in the third column. We had a good year, and this collects the parking revenue, and for a long time it was a struggling account for about 5 years, and it was just a blip on the screen. But this year we're collecting, we think, $250,000 if the water doesn't come up too high. Because if the water gets up to floods, probably 24, 25 foot on the scale, we don't have any parking at all. And it's pushing 17, 18 foot right now. The water level
Gauge, the St. Louis gauge.
on the gauge, yes. We budgeted 125 for expenditures, and that would be expenditures related to that area that I described. So we're projecting a 334,000 carryover to 2025. We're going to keep that number at 250 on the parking, and which should give us 584. We raised our expenditures to 425, and the expected income, which would be rolled over to FY26, of 159,000. Then in the municipal terminal account, that's the city terminal, which is just north of downtown, and it's currently leased to SCF, or subleased to SCF. We have the master lease with the city, but the carryover for the revenue items include a carryover and lease revenue from SCF, and then there's a item for royalty. If SCF, whenever they transfer tonnage, it runs through that port, and we get I think 7 cents a ton.
25 cents.
25 cents a ton. I was thinking of the fleeting. That's about, isn't that 7? If they have
Yeah, fleeting is 7% of their fleeting
7%.
revenue.
Okay. We also get federal and state grants. The ARPA funds that the state provided to the city is that in that number, along with the state gives us their non-federal grants every year, about $1 million in non-federal grants. And then the other category is program revenue from non-governmental, which would be like SCF matches in that category. So we're projecting 2.770 in FY24. Their lease revenue is slightly above what we projected. That's a fixed amount, and it's raised by, I think there's an inflation factor. When inflation was below 2%, we inserted a 2% clause for inflation every year, and that's adjusted in August. So where you see 382 projected in 24, we got 390 projected in 25. The royalty income seems to have plateaued. We're going to keep that at 200,000. The federal grants, federal state grants at 1,250,000. From what we know, it's that's pretty much all the state, a little bit of the ARPA funds, and that 1,250,000 will be used for public improvements, and in FY25, that's going to be on the incinerator area, the trash transfer area, for the items that Susan already talked about, the HDR and the removal of the smokestacks down there. So actually, the smokestacks are in the 800,000 in the current year. I think they're supposed to come down by June 30th, aren't they, Susan?
No, they're by the end of April.
May.
The stacks themselves
Good.
soon.
It will
Okay.
be before June.
It'd be before June.
So we list those under a category called public improvements, those are not leased to the Port Authority, they're city property, and that these would be improving of city property. The items of expense are interest on the loan, which is 60 this year and 50 next year, depreciation on improvements to the leasehold that we made at the city terminal at 700,000, consultant expense of 50,000. I talked about the 1,250,000 in public infrastructure improvements, and then regular maintenance and repair of 125,000. No particular items, but if things happen that we need to insert some funds to assist SCF, that would be what that is for. That leaves us with net income of 400,000. I add back the non-cash of 700, the depreciation item, and subtract out loan principal payments, which include the prepayment, which would come from the 300 I mentioned on page 1, leaving and that is that's a positive item on the bottom, of fund balance transfer from the Port Development Fund, leaving a rollover to the next fiscal year of 850,000. So all three accounts are doing quite well in comparison to prior years, and we think we have a balance of usage and projected rollovers, because there's a lot of contingencies with these numbers when you have state grants that something could insert itself, that the grants don't mature, and are, with the river itself, high water and things like that can interrupt. But if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them for you.
I have a couple questions, Charlie. And some of my questions are very naive because I don't know, this is my first time going over a budget.
Well, you're talking to the right person then.
Okay, good. All right. Number one, how long do you expect the ARPA funds to continue coming in?
We don't expect them to come in. Our agreement with the state is the same as the city's agreement, and they need to be spent or obligated by December of 26.
December of 26, okay. And then there was, and I guess you, in a way, you have answered the question, because when I was reading the executive summary, I didn't know how our contribution towards the compiling a new diversity study, I mean, how would that help our board, our commission, our work that we do?
It's helpful to the entire city, Commissioner Seymour, and it was mandated that SLDC consult, and with actually we're almost at completion, and it totaled over 400,000. So this would help SLDC cover the cost of that. There's other things that it would help SLDC cover, but that one kind of stuck out in my mind. And Neil has made a lot of commitments in the Laclede's Landing area.
Oh, okay.
So we put the money to good use that the Port Authority transfers over to SLDC.
Okay. And I guess.
Yeah, I think it goes to the issues Charlie just mentioned as well. The Port Authority has traditionally been a net funder of SLDC projects because we have income that comes through various lease revenues and up until around 2001, we even had the lease with the floating casino and the president. So a lot of these, while diversity is important to, I think, the Port Authority itself, also goes to the entirety of the SODC projects.
Understand, okay, so I guess that explains the almost like 53% increase under Port Development Fund budget from SODC Administration and Economic Development from 850,000 to 1.3 million in 2025. I mean, that kind of jumped at me.
Yeah, normally, as our financial picture gets a little brighter, SLDC has a number of needs like that, or the money would help fill the gap, so to speak. And it's basically, I mean, the city has helped us pay for like the diversity study in the past, but not this time. And we also got support in the past from MSD, and I think the airport helped us also, and that didn't happen this time either. So this is one way to help SLDC fund that consultant contract.
All right, okay. Well, thank you. Thank you.
I think in the absence of that, when, we had been raising the SLDC commitment, it was like 600,000 2 years ago, and we raised it slightly each of the last 2 years, but now we're kind of on more solid footing with all these leases. I think we've addressed almost all of them as far as their bringing them up to market on their lease rates.
Okay,
And now, although we do look at up and down and see if there's available space to lease out, and we find stuff all the time. So
good.
we'll keep looking.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Charlie.
I think he got.
Yeah, Chair McBride noted his computer is having some technical issues right now.
Yeah.
Think maybe we-
Do we need a vice president lead the meeting?
Yeah, I think maybe we give him a minute or so to see if it's resolved, and then we can see if the vice chair would be able to take.
Oh, here he comes. Yeah, he's frozen on the other screen.
All right.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Very good. Then let's, are there any other questions on this resolution? Hearing none, I entertain a motion.
So move Williams.
Second, Miller.
We have a roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Williams,
Aye.
Commissioner Seymour,
Aye.
Commissioner Kay,
Aye.
Commissioner Miller,
Aye.
Chair McBride.
Matt, you need to unmute yourself. There you go.
I believe we have some, oh, thank you. At this time, we have open agendas. We'll take up the reports from our consultants and lobbyists.
Could I request that the report about the cruise boats business go first, since Colin since he has a meeting at 10?
I'm
Oh.
sorry, before we do move to open agenda, Chair, we didn't get your vote on the last roll call. I think that you might.
My
have been
apologies.
muted.
I was muted, that I was,
Okay.
was my apologies.
Okay, sorry, Susan.
So under open agenda, Colin Wellenkamp, Executive Director for Mississippi River Cities and Towns Initiative, has some information about the cruise line industry. All three cruise lines that came here are on his advisory board. One of them has since gone bankrupt, American Queen Voyages. But the city of St. Louis still receives visits from Viking and American Cruise Lines. So Colin, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Sorry about the truncated open mic. Apologies. We were disappointed, of course, to hear about the closing of American Queen Voyages. The mayors of MRCTI, we held our Washington DC meeting last month. We invited both Viking and American Cruise Lines, ACL, to come and talk about the overall health of the river cruising industry from their point of view, especially along the Mississippi River, and also comment on where they thought, if they thought that AQV's closing was more akin to systemic issues within the industry, or more specific to just AQV and its management. They gave a report, both cruise lines gave a report in detail. They spent over an hour with us in Washington, and we're happy to share with you that they believe that this was confined to AQV's particular financial management issues and the expense of their contracts that had built over time, as well as they sustained unique impact from the COVID-19 pandemic that the other cruise lines were better able to weather. Why were the other cruise lines better able to weather COVID than AQV? Well, one, Viking really wasn't operating yet, so they didn't have to take a hit. Their hits were solely on the production side of actually building the boat for the Mississippi River. COVID-19 incurred some delays for them, but not too bad. And ACL had cheaper contracts, and that's really where it came down to. AQV's contracts over time had accumulated to be very expensive terms. And the way that their boats operated, also since they were more historic vessels, their flagship is a historic vessel, that's the American Queen, very expensive to operate. These costs just compounded over time. They couldn't get out from underneath them. They tried. The last ditch effort was earlier this year, really, to sell their company and sell their debt. They held a meeting in Louisiana trying to get buyers for that back in the first part of the year, and they just couldn't get there, basically because their debt and the way everything was structured at that time was just too expensive. And I'll be able to show that to you with real numbers here in a second. But I do want to assure you, as the statement says from our mayors, right there in front of you in the shared screen, we have a very healthy cruise line economy that is enjoying a lot of growth and renaissance right now. So the outdoor recreation and tourism industry revenue for the Mississippi River is over $37 billion annually. That makes it the second largest economy on the river, second only to manufacturing. And we're looking at a growth rate of 20% or better year over year from 2023 through 2030. And that data was provided by an economic reviewing firm that keeps track of the cruising industry. So things look good overall for the remaining two cruise lines. ACL and Viking both plan to add more vessels, and these are not cheap vessels to build. They do, before they build these boats, Viking especially, you're looking at Viking spends nearly $200 million per vessel for the Mississippi River. They have one that's operating and two more in the queue. They're not going to go into that expense without knowing they've got plenty of tickets to sell to cover that. Both cruise lines are pretty much sold out for most of 2024 already, and they are now into 2025 bookings. And they have recovered from the pandemic pretty well. Viking pretty much avoided it altogether. So what's going to happen to American Queen Voyages and its fleet is the big question. Well, as predicted, most industry insiders did predict that AQV would be bought at some point coming out of bankruptcy. And their predictions proved to be true. MRCTI is listed as an interested party in the bankruptcy of AQV because, well, a lot of our cities were left holding billables from AQV for various fees and docking costs that would be owed to them as a creditor. So MRCTI has been listed as an interested party in the proceedings. I'll just let you know the assets that were acquired by ACL over the past couple of weeks. They did purchase 4 vessels, including the flagship of AQV, the American Queen. And if you know anything about bankruptcy law, you know that you can get extremely valuable assets for very low prices. And that's exactly what happened. So they got 4 vessels for a total cost of $6.3 million. American Queen, which is over a 400 passenger vessel, historic vessel, ACL bought for $2.1 million. The boat alone was worth over 50. So it's just an amazing discount. They also bought the Empress, the Countess, and the Duchess, all between $1.6 and $2 million. The Duchess was bought for $200,000, a multi-million-dollar vessel bought for $200,000. They also bought trademarks associated with AQV, website domain names, and business records. So it isn't clear what ACL intends to do with this fleet as of now in terms of, are they going to offer an additional experience and ticket for that out of their current platform? Are they going to create a subsidiary with its own sort of brand and marketing? We don't know yet, but ACL currently, as it's operating, and the experience that it offers is more modern, much more modern than AQV. AQV prided itself on a journey back in time, creating an experience for its customers that was unique from the rest of the cruising industry, ocean or waterway. So we don't know what ACL is going to do with this. It's not really congruent to their current brand and marketing. So insiders are expecting them to create something different than what they already have. Happy to answer any questions on this as it stands right now.
Thank you, Colin. Any questions for Colin on this?
No.
It's an interesting situation, but looks like it's going to end up resolving itself. And thank you for your work and your partnership, along with everything you do
with the MRCTI, and we got to find a way to shorten that acronym a little bit.
Yeah, I will add, Mr. Chairman, just very quickly that the drive for additional dockside facilities and waterfront amenities to help this industry grow. We don't expect that demand and drive to falter from this. We expect it to grow, in fact. And in fact, MRCTI is in conversations with the Delta Regional Authority and other grant making authorities to help our cities with those costs so that we can assist with this industry and also make sure to leverage the growth of this industry for better waterfront experiences and assets for our cities. So even if this industry does come and go, there's other experiences that can keep our waterfronts attractive and lively for communities to interact with.
Very good. Any other questions for Colin? Hearing none, then we'll take up the lobbyists. Jackie, you want to start, or Chris?
Yeah, I can go ahead. Thank you. So we have 5 weeks left this legislative session in Jeff City. After today, they still have to go in. But we are kind of down to the crunch time. 5 weeks doesn't sound like a long time, but in legislative time is a very, very long time. Most people are anticipating some very long days and nights in the coming weeks. The House of Representatives has passed the budget finally. There has been there's significant changes that were made between the governor's budget recommendations and what the House is recommending. So we do think that there's going to be some significant changes made in the Senate. Right now, our collective port, I always call it our port pot, but the port money for capital improvements is sitting right at $11.6 million with what Susan and the port will get out of that is $1 million right now. I think I've updated you all on some legislation that was passed last year that made some modifications on how state funding would be distributed out to ports. It was some minor changes, but it created a Waterways and Ports Trust Fund, allowed for appropriations to roll over for a couple years, which was all good things. But in that legislation, there was an unintentional definition that excludes St. Louis Port Authority from being able to access those funds. In that legislation, it says that eligible entities to draw down appropriations have to be located on land owned or held in long-term lease by ports. And as you all know, St. Louis Port Authority does not own its land and only holds the Municipal River Terminal in long-term lease. So we've been working on legislation this session to make a small tweak to that to make sure that St. Louis has access to those funds. We have everyone on board. We don't have any opposition to it. That was the original intent in the first place. We have Senator Steve Roberts in the Senate that has been championing it for us, and Representative Del Taylor in the House who has been championing it for us. And they're both Democrats from the city of St. Louis. And we have a number of Republicans on transportation committees or very active in port legislation that have been helping us too. With the conflicts and slowness of everything moving this legislative session, we've also been anticipating a very small amount of bills actually making it to passage this year. We have not had one bill be truly agreed to and finally passed yet. And that's quite unheard of with 5 weeks left to not have that. So with that said, we, over the past couple of weeks, have been working with the Senate Appropriations Chair to make sure we have a separate line item in the budget for St. Louis Port Authority in the event that we don't get our fix done this year. That just ensures that that we get our allocation this year from the state. We should have confirmation in the next couple weeks of that being done, but the Senate Appropriations Chair has given me some pretty confident agreement that that will be put in there to make sure that we don't get skipped over this year. In addition to that, I don't know if I've talked to you all since Susan came up when the Missouri Port Authority Association had their big meeting up here and had the time and took the chance to sit down and eat dinner with Del Taylor and Senator Steve Roberts, which they were very, very appreciative of Susan taking the time to educate them on everything port related. And I hope Susan had a good time while she was up here too.
I did.
With that said, there's a ton of other stuff going on right now. The Senate, with 5 weeks left, has a lot of big controversial priority legislation that they still need to get done. Passing the federal reimbursement allowance is one big one that is a multi-billion-dollar drawdown from the federal government. It's a hospitals, ambulance districts tax themselves in order to pull down federal money. It is unfortunately a very controversial bill that gets tied to abortion funding. So I think that will take multiple days to actually get done, and that will probably happen in the next few weeks. And then on top of that, the Senate passing the budget is also probably going to be very controversial. So it is everyone's still kind of in limbo to see how many bills actually pass or not. We most likely will see a few very big omnibus bills pass, but if I were to bet, I would say we're going to have a lot fewer bills actually making it to final passage than normal. But with that said, I don't know if anyone has any questions. I didn't go into elections or anything, but if you have any questions, I can answer those too.
Thank you, Ms. Barget. Any questions from the commissioners? I'm not seeing any or hearing any, so thank you. Mr. Johnson, would you bring us up to speed on what's going on in the federal government?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are you all able to hear me okay?
We are.
Yes.
Good morning. So we've had a very busy period over the last month or so, and we've been working together with Susan and her team on two priorities. One is enhancing the relationship between the port and the Coast Guard, hopefully to result in a recruiting center from the Coast Guard to be located on the river in St. Louis, and also ultimately working towards getting the Coast Guard to moor its cutters at the port. So the Coast Guard has been one significant priority. I'll get into a little bit more detail on that in a second. Our other significant priority has been working to find federal funding for the South Riverfront redevelopment project that Susan referred to a little bit earlier in the meeting. So let me start first with the Coast Guard. As we've reported earlier, our efforts with the Coast Guard began with
We can't hear you.
Hey, Chris, something happened on your end where we can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
We can now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
Sorry. So I'm not sure where I lost you, but I was saying that we had initiated our efforts with the Coast Guard by meeting with Admiral David Barata, who is the Coast Guard.
Shoot. We lost you.
I think it's Chris's.
It seems to be cutting out on your end because it doesn't show you're muted, Chris.
Can you hear me?
Now I can hear you. Yes.
Sorry. By the way, Jackie was cutting out earlier on my end. So anyhow, let me continue. Hopefully,
Technical problems are abounding evidently today.
so Admiral Barata so we told Admiral Barada that we very much wanted to work with the Coast Guard to have a recruiting center for the Coast Guard on the river. He was good enough to put us in contact with Captain Ben Keffer, who heads up the Coast Guard's recruiting command. The Coast Guard is desperately trying to recruit more folks to join the Coast Guard. Their current location in St. Louis is relatively isolated, so they're quite excited about the possibility of having a new recruiting center on the river. The person on Captain Keffer's staff who handles real estate for the recruiting command, Jonelle Clark, is coming to St. Louis in the next couple of weeks to visit with Susan and her team and others who are working on this, with the hope that we can get them to agree to move their recruiting center to the river. The longer term goal with the Coast Guard, as I mentioned, is to get them to commit to dock their cutters at the port. That is not going to happen overnight. There are a lot of complicated factors involved, but we view this first step of working with the Coast Guard to at this recruiting office in.
We lost you again, Chris.
Can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me move to the second priority while you all are able to hear me. So the second thing we've been working on is developing, trying to locate and secure funding for the South Riverfront Development Project. Susan and her team have raised roughly $7.5 million for that project, but we need another $5 million. So we have been doing a lot of outreach. One has been with the United States Maritime Administration, which is part of the Federal Department of Transportation. Susan met recently with the head of the Port Infrastructure Development Program, which is a program that funds infrastructure at ports. We separately met with Congresswoman Cori Bush and have submitted to her a request for congressional funding. We used to call them earmarks in the amount of $5 million. We don't know yet whether that is going to happen, but we had a good meeting with the Congresswoman, and Neil Richardson, by the way, has written a letter in support of this earmark request. So hopefully that will result in funds. We are additionally reaching out to the Economic Development Administration, or EDA, which is part of the Department of Commerce. And we've had a discussion with the regional director, Chad Egan, of EDA about the possibility of securing some EDA funds. Susan will be in Washington next week, and we're hoping to meet with folks at EDA's headquarters in Washington. And then finally, we're also looking at potential EPA, Environmental Protection Agency grants. So we're covering every possibility so that we can hopefully come up with this additional $5 million so that the South Riverfront Redevelopment Project can move forward as planned. So let me stop there. I apologize for the audio problem.
Well, you picked a good time to stop, Chris.
Yeah.
Cut out again. But as I said before, I can absolutely relate since I'm on my cell phone now. Any questions for Mr. Johnson? I think he's got his mute on and off now. Any question from commissioners? Hearing none. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Jackie. All right. Anything else in open agenda, Susan?
No, I think we're good.
Very good. All right. Well, thank you all for your time and patience. And our next meeting will be held on May 9, 2024. At this time, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I put the motion forth.
It's moved.
So moved.
And is that a second, Commissioner Kay?
Yes, sir.
Moved and seconded. We are adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.